king g8, d takes e4, white gets the material back, and of course, you also have some ideas with knight f6 in this position. And after bishop d5 now, well, you can take on g6, but also knight f6 is very interesting now. Knight f6, let's take a look at this option. Knight f6 check, guys. Knight takes f6, and then you have two possibilities, bishop f6. But I think bishop f6 could be dubious in that position because of g5. Closing the h-file, and after queen g5, maybe rook g8. And now the g-file is opened, and the rook on g8 is doing a great job, and the king on g1 could be suffering a lot. Incredible. So after knight f6, maybe rook f6, and Wesley So goes for knight f6, check. And after knight f6, is rook f6 working? Chess is so beautiful. Rook f6 working, because if black takes on f6 with the bishop, pawn takes e6, the king is forced to take on g6, and the key is that now white can go queen h6 check. This forces black to jump to f5 with the king, and then rook f1 check. Only move is king e6, rook f6, and white takes the queen on f6. So Wesley, what did you drink today? Rook f6. Such a beautiful move. Bishop f6 now runs into h takes e6, followed by queen to h6. Magnus can think about taking with the queen as well. He's got only two options because retreating the queen runs into pawn takes g6 with mate. So he takes with the queen, but of course, this is just a very good position for Wesley So now. Magnus tries to close the h-file with the move g-file, trying to create some counterplay with a rook on g8. But after queen g5, let's count pieces, guys. So Magnus has a queen against a rook and a bishop, and then some pawns as well. He plays queen f5 and h6 deflection. He takes with a check now, and of course, the only sad piece in the board is the a1 rook. If Wesley manages to bring the rook to g1, then black is going to suffer a lot. Wesley going for a check now, taking some time now to finish the game. He knows he's got the advantage. He knows he can defeat the wall, well, the number one in the one. I was about to say the world champion, but of course, you guys know that the current world champion is Dingler. But the number one in the wall, of course, queen f6, back king h7, and maybe some king h2 or king f2. If a rook lands on g1, then queen h4 would be made. So rook g1 is threatened, so that's why Magnus goes rook g2, trying to activate rook on g2, but queen h4 check, king to g6, and probably rook g1. This is forcing once again to bring this king to f5, King Leonidas. Rook to g1, king f5, and this is close to be checkmate. Let's see if Wesley So can finish the game. It's never easy against Magnus Carlsen. He's got 1,000 lives. So queen h7 forcing rook g6, otherwise rook on g8 was falling, and now queen d7, very, very precise move, forcing bishop e6, otherwise the bishop on d5 was hanging, and queen to b7, rook h8. So let's analyze this position. Wesley has one queen and a pawn against a rook and a bishop, but more important, look at the pawn structure. You know, the black pawn structure look like the Philippines, so many islands, right? And Wesley So knows how to deal with Philippines, right? Because he's originally from there. He was born in Philippines, and then he moved to the US. So the problems with this pawn structure is that, of course, you know, it is extremely weak. Pawns don't support each other, so it's very easy to target those pawns. You know, the only counterplay that Magnus has is the h3 pawns. That's why Wesley So protects it by playing king g3, and Magnus goes g5, maybe giving this square for the rook on h4 now, which is covered by the pawn on g5. But of course, you know, a player like Wesley So should win 100% of these games against even Magnus Carlsen. Queen g7, targeting the rook on h8, and if you want to keep the rook on the h-file, you either have to go to h5 or h4. Rook h4 from Magnus Carlsen and b3, such a technical move, stopping c4 and then a4, fixing the weaknesses on a5, on c5, sorry, and on c5, and now the queen is gonna grab all those weaknesses. You know, of course, you got some queen f8 ideas, followed by queen c5, and Magnus only has one target in this position, which is the h3 pawn, but he cannot move the king, right? You have no moves with the king, so that means the bishop cannot put pressure against the h3 pawn. So Magnus tries to activate rook by playing e4. Well, Wesley thinking about taking this pawn on e4. Of course, e3 could be an option for black, trying to promote that pawn. Of course, this is very far from reality, but you know, Magnus gonna try. You know, we've seen Magnus, you know, winning some games where he was completely lost. So of course, it's never easy against the number one on the wall. He takes on e4, and now Magnus takes with a king. Queen to g6. This forces black to go basically back with the king, or to play bishop f5 in order to cover the bishop. Queen c6 check. Now king to d4, and Wesley plays c3. Such a beautiful move. If you take that pawn, then queen c5 wins material. So queen c5, king f6, and now you got a queen and two pawns versus a rook and a bishop. Once again, the only counterplay is the pawn on h3. So queen to b6 check. Now bishop e6, and it's not easy to protect the pawn on h3, so let's see how Wesley deals with that. He plays king to g2, such an elegant move, guys. If rook takes h3, then queen e6 just wins the pawn endgame. King e6, king h3, and then you play b4. You have 2 pass pawns, and then the position is completely won. Magnus trying to fight, playing rook e4 now. But of course, you can start pushing the pawns on the queen side. I don't like to take the pawn on a5 because that allows bishop to b3, and then we won't have connected pass pawns anymore. So that's why Wesley decides to play b4. This is, a better move in my opinion. Wesley has a lot of technique, and now these pawns are ready to be pushed. Rook a2, and of course you can play a5. Black's idea is to play rook a3 followed by, well, by taking on h3, queen d4 check, king f5, and now some more checks on the board. King e5. a5, finally pushing, you know, look at the queen on d3 who stops rook a3. Wesley saw is playing such a strong prophylactic game as well, right? This move is stopping all kind of counterplay from the black side. And after bishop d5, queen e3, king f5, it's time to push, right, at some point. So we need to push the pawn to a6 if we want to finish the game. Well, Wesley has to be careful because rook g2 is mate in this moment. So we're gonna be extremely careful. Rook g2 is mate. Magnus intending the last trap, the last trick. So how to run away from that checkmate net? He goes king g4. Now he finds a way along the h5 square, and after rook g2, well, king h5, bishop e4, and now, well, some check on c3 probably is just a good move in order to proceed with a6. And there we go. And white is very close to promote the a pawn, and Magnus is about to resign with only 40 seconds in the clock. Rook c2, and well, Magnus resigns. What a game from Wesley. So what a sacrifice with knight g4, with knight g5. Sorry, what a move, e5 in order to proceed.